Chapter 9. Preaching Good News to the Zombified. We kept doing the meals, but on Super Bowl Sunday 2010, we moved them from Monday nights to Sunday afternoons and kept them in that time slot. Part of the reason for this was that on Mondays, my wife and I did all the cooking and setting up all afternoon, and when other volunteers got off work, they came down to just dish out the food. We were being overwhelmed with the labor and thought we might get better volunteer help on Sunday afternoons preparing the meals. We were right. The other reason is that we finally corrected a typical yet common and crucial mistake we church people do when we start a ministry to the poor. We didn't do any homework with anyone already in the neighborhood to discover what was already being done and how we could supplement or assist existing works. I don't know why churches do this, but we always seem to feel it's the call of God on our ministry to save the world single-handedly. We learned there was another Monday night meal already in existence, and a few other churches downtown served other days of the week. Nobody was serving a meal on Sundays, so we took that time slot. All of us who were preparing and distributing meals got so connected that we advertised each other's meals and often shared surplus goods. One of those ministries ended up losing its location to serve the meals and contracted with us to offer a meal out of our building on Thursday nights, and we agreed. The meals weren't supposed to be our ministry. They were supposed to teach us what kind of ministry to build, but we were few in number. Many weeks and months there was a kitchen crew, but only myself and one other Christian guy in the room trying to represent for Jesus among the 150 to 200 street people coming in. I was in way over my head and way over any training I'd ever had. I've had some pretty wild discussions with people about their lives and God. One woman I met told me how she hated God because her ex-husband was building a meth lab in their house while she had gone to work. The cops raided the place and arrested her because the lease was in her name. She did time in prison, and while there, the ex-husband beat their 6-year-old child to death. She hates God for not protecting her little girl. She's a drug addict and has had another child taken away by Child Protective Services because of her habit. She was diagnosed with a major illness, but they wouldn't treat her while she's using drugs. Before our talk ended, she asked me if I would pray for her and that other baby girl out there somewhere. Despite her fears and hatred of God, we did. Another man told me about how he punched a guy out in a nightclub in an argument over his wife. He talked of wanting to change, but not being able. We talked of sin and God and righteousness, and coming to the place where we all realize we can't become the men or women we really want to be on our own. Sooner or later, we all realize that we need God's grace to change. I gave him a Bible and told him to read the Gospel of John, and he and his wife started coming to church regularly after that. She told me he was changing since meeting Jesus. I took a van load of hand-picked homeless guys to my daughter's high school musical play once. When afterwards I was dropping them off at the shelter where they live, the directions consisted of turn right at the prostitute on the corner, left into the alley between those two buildings, and stop where it looks like those two guys are making a drug deal. Getting out of the van, one of the guys laughed and said, "Want us to write those directions down for you next time, Pastor Rob?" The last guy to exit turned back to me and said in quiet tones, "Thanks for reminding us that there's another life out there, Pastor Rob." At the time, that guy was trying to get his Class C driver's license back and planned on re-entering the mainstream of life. There are so many stories. Sometimes all that is needed for someone is a friend to share the hope of Christ and believe in them again. On any given Sunday afternoon or Thursday night, a Christian man or woman can get into a half-dozen discussions when we feed the poor at our church. I mostly focus on the Sundays and let the other organization work with its team on the building on Thursdays. But many a Sunday, there were only 4 or 5 of us Christians in the room amidst the 150 to 200 poor people who came in. That's an awfully light witness. I'm always amazed that the Bible speaks so much about our Christianity impacting the poor, but so few of us have had any kind of track record doing it. Jesus said of his mission, "The Spirit of the Lord is on me because he has anointed me to preach good news to the poor. He has sent me to proclaim freedom for the prisoners and recovery of sight for the blind, to release the oppressed." Luke chapter 4, verse 18. Years ago, when I worked at a large church that ran a $1.4 million annual budget, I would often read verses about the poor and get a cold chill up my spine. we did very little for the poor while we ran our huge program and spent the money on our staff and facility. I often wondered how much of our efforts would burn when Jesus came back. James chapter 1, verse 27 says, "Pure and undefiled religion in the sight of our God and Father is this, to visit orphans and widows in their distress, and to keep oneself unstained by the world." I guess my religion in those days was pretty impure and much defiled. I'm not sure how I'd measure it now. If you were ever haunted that your faith might be just a sham full of a lot of pretentious activity, maybe you ought to try living out the commands to minister to the poor. Go down to any meal or outreach somewhere. See if Jesus has a divine appointment scheduled for you. Take a chance and see if the Holy Spirit will use your life. You'll be in over your head, but very glad you did.